The slum housing sat at the edge of the harbor, wedged between the fish processing plant and the old rail yard. It wasn't called the Slums on any official map. The town records called it Harborview Estates, which was a joke nobody laughed at. Harborview was where the island put its poor, its troubled, its forgotten. The people who kept Ravenshore running but never got invited to the fancy dinners on the cliffs. I went alone. Burke offered to come, but I knew these streets. I'd walked them as a kid, back when my father was working the boats and my mother was still alive, before everything changed. Before the cliff families became enemies and the harbor families became strangers. Some things you had to do yourself. The first person I talked to was Mrs. Delgado. She ran a laundromat on Harbor Street, had been running it for 40 years, knew everyone who'd ever lived in these blocks. Pierre Aberdeen. She squinted at me through glasses thick enough to stop bullets. Why you asking about him? I'm looking into some old records, trying to fill in gaps. You police? Off duty. She studied me for a long moment. Then she laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Pierre Aberdeen, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. She folded a towel with practiced hands. He grew up 3 buildings over from here. His mother was a drunk, his father was gone before he was born. Kid practically raised himself. What was he like? Quiet, too quiet for his own good. Never got in trouble, never made friends, never did anything anyone noticed. She shrugged. Smart, though, real smart. Got that scholarship to the community college, only kid from the harbor to ever do that. Did he have any friends, anyone he spent time with? Not that I remember, he was a loner. She paused. Although, what? There was a group of boys he ran with sometimes. Not friends exactly, more like people who used him. She shook her head. Harbor kids, rough ones, they'd have him do things, steal from the shops, scout out houses to rob. He was good at being invisible, you know? Nobody noticed him. Do you remember any names? It was 30 years ago, honey. I barely remember what I had for breakfast. She thought about it. There was one kid, bigger than the others, mean. His last name was Vance, I think. Yeah, Vance. Family of fishermen, most of them dead now. Vance, like Danny Vance. I found Danny's mother in a care home on the mainland side of the bridge. She was 73, frail, her mind drifting in and out of the present. My son didn't kill anyone, she said when I sat down across from her. Danny's not a violent boy, he's just lost. I know, Mrs. Vance, I'm not here about that. I showed her a photo of Pierre Aberdeen, a recent one from his Algotech employee file. Do you recognize this man? She squinted at the picture. For a moment, nothing registered, then her face changed. That's the Aberdeen boy, she said quietly. Pierre, he used to run with my brother's kids when he was young. Your brother? Charlie Vance. Her voice went distant. He died in '95, fishing accident. His boys grew up wild after that. Did Pierre stay in contact with the family? I don't know. He left the harbor as soon as he could. Got himself educated, got a real job, left the rest of us behind. She looked at the photo again. Why are you asking about him? Just following up on some old connections. She stared at me with eyes that had seen too much. You think he did something, she said. Something bad. I didn't answer. Charlie's boys, she said slowly. They were trouble, the kind of trouble that doesn't stay in the past. She handed the photo back. If Pierre Aberdeen was mixed up with them, whatever he became, whatever he did, it started here, in the harbor, with people like us. Back at my apartment, I spread everything out on the table. Pierre Aberdeen had grown up in the slum housing. He'd run with the Vance family when he was young. Then he'd gotten out, scholarship, education, a job in tech. He'd erased his past, created a new identity, built himself into someone respectable. But the connections were still there. Buried, forgotten, but there. Danny Vance was the great-nephew of the boys Pierre had run with as a kid. Danny still lived in the harbor, still dealt in the same petty crimes the Vance family had always dealt in. And when Pierre needed someone to take the fall for murder, he'd reached back into his past. Found someone disposable. Someone nobody would believe. Someone from the same streets he'd escaped. He'd framed Danny because Danny was easy, because Danny was familiar, because the harbor families would always be suspects while the cliff families counted their money. I wrote it all down. The connections, the patterns, the years of careful invisibility that had hidden a killer in plain sight. Pierre Aberdeen was clean on paper. Too clean. But underneath the polish, underneath the helpful smile and forgettable face, there was something dark, something that had been hiding for 20 years. And I was going to drag it into the light.